Hello again, Ice and Fire Miniatures Wargamers, Kolvox here, coming to you with another faction deep dive video. This time we're going to be talking about the Brotherhood without banners and how to play them in the Milestone Campaign League. Let's get into it. So when we think about the themes of the Brotherhood without banners and we look at the lore, we see that the roots of the movement originate when Beric Dondarrion is dispatched by Eddard Stark, serving as Hand of the King for Robert Baratheon shortly before his death. Beric is sent with a group of warriors to bring Gregor Clegane to justice for his crimes against the people of the Riverlands. Of course, not everything goes as planned. Robert Baratheon dies, and the Seven Kingdoms are plunged into chaos. Beric Dondarrion himself is slain on campaign, but resurrected by his companion Thoros of Myr. Together, they lead a formidable but underground military force in Westeros, often stealing from greater powers to fund their work, but keeping their operations clandestine and away from the prying eyes of those greater powers. In terms of the Milestone Campaign League, this translates to what I call a sleeper faction. The Brotherhood is one of two sleeper factions in the game, the other one being the Night's Watch, and what that means is that they will, in all likelihood, stay at or near the very bottom of the might ranking until the very end of the campaign, when their special catch-up mechanics allow them to get a huge lump sum of might at the end of month 6. This can be a blessing and a curse because it means that the Brotherhood is not gaining their own might rank bonuses against other factions throughout the campaign, although they do have a little trick for that we'll talk about later. But it can be useful in keeping the Brotherhood off of the radar, so to speak, of the other big factions. If your rival factions aren't thinking about you being a threat to them, they're probably not going to spend the effort of rooting you out of the developments that you hold, which is going to be great for you as a Brotherhood player. Another main theme of the Brotherhood faction is the idea of building an underground network throughout Westeros. While the other factions are all conquering and holding regions, the Brotherhood actually doesn't have the ability to do so, and they're instead holding these developments within the regions. And the mechanics for how they get and hold those are such that they're really hard to root out, and they're likely to spread all through Westeros throughout the campaign. This means that it will be hard for your opponents to consolidate you into a single base of operations and try and exterminate you, but it also means that you won't really have a strong base of operations that you can ever really call your own. Another theme of Brotherhood without banners is the idea that their actions sort of behind the scenes are in ways guiding the actions of the greater houses of Westeros on the grand stage. This is really manifested in the Milestone Campaign League by the actions that they can perform on their strategy sheet and how much they can influence the other factions in ways no one else can. As always with MCL factions, we wanted to make sure that the Brotherhood is fun to play in both canon-friendly ways and also ways that are contrary to canon play. So canon play for a Brotherhood faction leader would look like being very quiet and under the radar in council and challenge phases, looking for battles to jump in on as an ally, trying not to ruffle too many feathers so that those high might rank powers work on rooting you out of their developments, and slowly performing those critical actions of King's Justice to surprise everyone at the end with a top tier might rank. Alternatively, if your personality is different, or if this is a subsequent playthrough and you just want to see what it would be like to run Brotherhood differently, they can be played exactly the opposite. They could be played with a very loud, charismatic faction leader who is vocal with all the other factions, wheeling and dealing diplomatically, making sure that the mechanics of unconventional warfare and trial by combat are being used as a lever to positively or negatively influence other factions. So now that we have an idea about Brotherhood themes, let's jump on into the strategy sheet. Don't be daunted by all the text on this sheet, but this is all to explain the various ways in which Brotherhood play super different from all the standard other 9 factions in Westeros. The first section here, Refuge Amongst Commoners, just explains that the Brotherhood can only ever control developments and never regions themselves. It explains how that happens, and that the Brotherhood does not use might to conquer, which is awesome because they start with 0 might, and this allows them to begin taking new territory right away. It also explains that whenever an opponent is attacking a region where you control the development, they have to declare that during challenge phase that they are intentionally attacking the development, in which case they can only choose sack upon victory. They cannot choose to conquer. It also points out that you can use any castles tied to developments, but not the region outside of them when you're playing a 1v1. So already you can see how differently the Brotherhood play from all the other factions, and it's about to get crazier when we get to unconventional warfare. So here we see that opposing factions do not gain might rank bonuses in 1v1 battles against Brotherhood. Obviously this is huge for you because there's going to be probably a huge gap between you and most of the opponents that you're fighting. This is also great for team battles too, because the rules just a little bit different here, and it makes it so that the higher might rank on your opponent's team counts as being your might rank as well. So that means you'll usually knock down whatever their might rank is to 10, as the Brotherhood for most of the game is probably going to be might rank 10. This makes you, as the Brotherhood faction leader, an extremely valuable ally, and it's going to be very tempting for any other factions who are fighting way up the might rank ladder against factions like Targaryens, Starks, or Baratheons early. They're going to want you as an ally in that fight because you're going to knock down the enemy might rank bonus so much. The last thing here is that all versions of Brotherhood characters may be played twice per month instead of all of the other factions who can only play each version of each character one time. This is huge. It explains how to use a proxy when you're moving a commander on the map and placing a commander twice on the map during challenge phase. But obviously this comes with some risk, because if your commander gets injured, captured, or killed in one battle and they have another battle scheduled later in the same month, obviously you have a huge problem there. You're either going to have to pull another commander from reserve, which as Brotherhood it's very likely that you will not have, or you're going to have to end up eating a total defeat in that subsequent battle, which is rough. Next, we have the trial by combat system, which is something that's also unique to Brotherhood. It's a special mechanic that you can only trigger during council phase. No one else can, and it has pretty big implications. Basically, at the start of council phase, you as the Brotherhood player are going to want to be aware of any characters in the entire campaign that currently have the status of captured, meaning they're being held by one faction that is not their home faction. Now, between that captives faction and the captor faction who is holding the character, those two factions may already be trying to come to some resolution to get that character released, whether that be some sort of diplomatic promise or an exchange of coin or something like that. You as the Brotherhood character need to jump on your window early in council phase and declare a trial by combat. Obviously, if there are multiple captured characters in your campaign, you want to be aware of that beforehand, and you want to know which character it's going to be most beneficial for you as the Brotherhood to trigger the trial on, because you can only trigger once per month. As soon as you declare that, all the game freezes. No one else is allowed to do any exchanges of coin or any more negotiating about the release of that captive until the trial is completed. At that point, the captor faction is going to select a region in which the trial is held, and that's going to be a huge benefit for them because it's potentially going to cause some location restriction hang-ups for whichever character might come and try and fight as a champion on behalf of the captive. Then both of those factions are going to select champions to fight in this trial by combat. The champion may be the captive itself, it may be from these two factions, or it may be someone who another faction has consented to send as a champion for that trial. The Brotherhood faction leader is then going to declare one of those two champions as favored by R'hllor. You'll see at the bottom of the page here, there's a number of modifiers that are going to be applied to the dice rolls of those two champions. Those two champions are then going to roll off to see who wins the trial by combat, which has brutal consequences. If the captive's champion wins, the captive is released, and the opposing champion makes a death save -2. That's huge. That's a coin toss to die. If the champion champion of the faction holding the captive wins or ties, the captive is executed, and their champion, if different, makes a death save -2. So one character dead for sure, and potentially another one very likely to be dead if an outside faction or their own faction had contributed another champion. These trial by combat events can really screw up faction rosters throughout the game. The fact that you as the Brotherhood get to trigger them and choose who the captive is and which champion is favored is massively important, and will probably mean that you're going to have a lot of other factions seeking your favor. Now, the rest of the character sheet is taken up by this special resource that only Brotherhood has, and that is King's Justice. So King's Justice is a score that you'll be putting in this little box here in the middle, and it's accumulated in the following ways. So you'll get 1 justice each time a Brotherhood character survives a battle. So if you have 4 Brotherhood characters in a battle that gets played, that's +4 justice right there. Each time a trial is initiated, that's +4 justice by itself. If a favored champion wins a trial by combat, that's +5. Every time the Brotherhood wins a battle, that's +7 justice. Then there's a list of characters here that are the accused. And each time one of the accused is injured, captured, or killed, that's huge, that's +10 justice. You'll notice there's a character there from each faction, so you'll want to keep an eye out for those characters. Each one of them is a commander, so each time those get played on the board, that should be an enticement to you to get involved in that battle, probably on the opposing side, so that you can influence the death, injury, or capture of that character. And then finally, your biggest lump sum here, +15 justice. That occurs each time the Brotherhood participates in a crucial battle. Well, what is a crucial battle? It's a battle at one of the big, super important landmarks in Westeros. So we have King's Landing, Winterfell, any of the 3 regions of the Wall itself, Storm's End, the Eyrie, Pike, or Sunspear. So what does King's Justice do? Well, it does 2 things. First of all, it fills up this meter on the right side of your page here, and every time you go up by 5 justice, you unlock another perk on this meter, and they are cumulative, they stack. This is where you're going to find +1 to your army size for various things that the Brotherhood has access to. It's also where you're going to trigger the free taking of developments throughout Westeros. There's one in almost every realm within Westeros that you're able to just voluntarily flip on a whim, and it becomes yours unless and until an enemy faction attacks you, declares that they're attacking that development specifically, and successfully sacks it. So it's really a pain to root the Brotherhood out of any developments that they own. So that's how King's Justice is going to help you through the campaign, but the second effect of King's Justice is really what's going to potentially make you win the campaign, and that is the Light of R'hllor. At the end of month 6, gain an amount of might equal to your total current justice. So all the justice that you've accumulated by playing as a good Brotherhood Without Banners player throughout the campaign flips and turns into might at the end of month 6, potentially, hopefully, skyrocketing you into that final battle. Just note that the meter here goes up to 100. That's where the perks stop, but your King's Justice actually has no cap. You could potentially have more than 100, say 150 King's Justice, and all of that would still transfer into might at the end of month 6. If you're playing well, you probably will have more than 100. Okay, now that we understand the super unique Brotherhood strategy sheet, let's take a look at the character traits on the roster here. And the first thing you should notice is that this roster is tiny. I mean, it is a postage stamp, but it is extremely powerful because for all of these characters, each version may be used twice per month instead of just once per month. At the start of the campaign, and probably for about half of the campaign, you're only going to have 2 commanders. That's Beric and Thoros. Catelyn starts the game as a Stark character. Of course, she could potentially become injured at some point. There are a few mechanics in the game that can cause NCUs to become injured, in which case she would become a Brotherhood character, but the most likely outcome is that there's a very tempting Stark mechanic on their strategy sheet, which voluntarily causes the death of Catelyn Stark, thereby making her a Brotherhood character. So unless the Starks intentionally avoid making that sacrifice, which nets them a lot of benefits. It is likely that you will end up with Catelyn Stark somewhere around the midpoint of the campaign, giving you a third commander, which again, in terms of Brotherhood characters, double use means you can play about 6 characters around the map during challenge phase instead of just 4. This is still not that many. So as Brotherhood, I would highly recommend that you consider picking up some neutral commanders. If you have any experience with them, go ahead and grab them. When we look at the traits themselves, the Brotherhood characters are super strong. So Master of the Duel and Favor of R'hllor for Beric Dondarrion just make him absolutely awesome. He is going to be the best character in the game at ever participating in Trials by Combat. Don't tell Sander Clegane I said that. When you look at Thoros, he is an amazing support character when it comes to keeping characters uninjured, not captured, and not killed when he participates in a battle. There's also some clever play in here with different events. You'll see that with Tom 7 Strings, Irrepressible, Angai's Can't Miss and Tournament Fighter, and Beric's Master of the Duel that I mentioned before. And the Brotherhood without banners is going to have much more interesting event play than probably any other faction, because whichever faction is might rank 10 always gets to choose their events from the available unrolled events instead of rolling them on a d20 like everybody else. That advantage cannot be overstated, and Brotherhood is probably going to have that advantage for the whole campaign unless the Night's Watch or one of these other low starting factions just has a terrible early game and happens to dip below you in might rank, in which case they are going to have that bonus as sort of a comeback mechanic for themselves. As a Brotherhood player, you need to read the events list and know it like the back of your hand. During challenge phase, you should be taking full advantage of the fact that you can pick the perfect event for the challenge that you intend to make. The last tricky thing I'll point out here at the bottom is the Ghost of High Heart's Fatal Prophecy. This is a very unusual trait because it triggers during challenge phase when the sides have declared in a battle that you're not participating in, and you get to declare one of the participating commanders as the target of Fatal Prophecy, in which case they're going to suffer a penalty to their death saves. This is going to cause you to get a lot of justice if you're right, and it's going to cause that character's faction to get a nice little boost of 4 might there if you're wrong and if they do survive. We talked about the different personalities and ways to play Brotherhood before, and this is a great example of that. A traditional canon approach to Fatal Prophecy would be picking a character that you want to die, letting that opposing commander know, hey, I've put Fatal Prophecy on this guy. Try to make sure that you can get him rolling death saves because he's going to have this big negative modifier. Alternatively, you could play it the opposite way. You could reach out to a faction that you want to be allied with. You want to endear yourself to this faction, and you could tell them, hey, I'm putting Fatal Prophecy on your commander that I know you're going to keep on the back line. Keep them safe. Do not risk them getting injured or killed this battle because they'll have this negative modifier. But in return, you are going to cash in on 4 might by making sure this character does not die. That's totally a deal that you can make with another faction to give them a little boost and earn some goodwill. Do not lose sight of the fact that you only have 2 NCUs for the majority of the campaign unless you're going to pick up Catelyn and have her be a third. Neutral NCUs are going to be extremely valuable to the Brotherhood without banners, even though you can play each of these twice. Now that we've seen the roster, let's jump over and look at the campaign map and how we're going to play it. You should be used to me saying this by now, but it's going to be very different than all the other factions. As you can see with the little green development chevron here, the Brotherhood without banners starts in control of the Stony Sept development, and that is it. If we hop over to the map details page, we'll see that there is the castle there that we get control of. You can check out Hollow Hill in the castle reference there. That's a Brotherhood only castle. We're generating a meager +1 coin, but we've got Peasant Levies +2 and Brotherhood units +2, so it's going to be really tough for anybody to root you out of the Stony Sept development, especially early on. Now here's where I want you to look when you're a Brotherhood player. Look at the development perks for all of the Riverland developments. You're going to see a fair amount of castles, a fair amount of coin, but most importantly, you're going to see some development perk list bonuses for Brotherhood and neutral units that will pretty much all be useful to you. So early campaign, before you've really locked in allies and enemies, if you're trying to decide where to spend, especially that first challenge before anyone else has had a turn in month 1, start taking these Riverlands developments. They're going to pay dividends for you as the game carries on, and they're going to be harder for your enemies to root you out than developments elsewhere. When you're looking at development perks throughout the rest of the map, especially when you're looking at which developments you want to unlock for free using the King's Justice effect, I want to go back to that principle I discussed about whether you're going to play the campaign as sort of a background manipulator bandit lord or a charismatic leader trying to vocally direct the other major powers. This is a great example of that because you can use the effect either way. So let's say you're coming up on that free development unlock for the Stormlands, for instance. It's early game, the Baratheons are still pretty much the only player there. You can go either direction with it. If you're trying to build rapport with the Baratheons and maybe create an alliance with them, check out their developments that they control, see if there's one that they don't control, and offer to the Baratheon faction leader, hey, when I get this effect, I will use it on this development you don't control so that you're not out any coin. Or is there a development that you would like me to take when I get this effect? Give that faction leader a choice, and maybe you can work a deal where they will commit to not trying to attack you or root you out of it later. Alternatively, let's look at a scenario where, say, we have friction with the Starks. You could look at which development in the north will do the most harm to their cause. One that comes to mind here is the logging development in Last Hearth, which boosts the dock range of all docks in your entire faction by 1. If the Starks lose that, it really limits their ability to move by sea and is going to enhance yours for any docks that you own. It also puts you nice and close to the wall and beyond the wall in case you want to get involved in any battles there. All in all, the Brotherhood without banners, if you're playing them well, you're a faction that everybody is going to want as their ally, and you're going to be a terrible thorn in the side for anyone who considers you an enemy. The strengths of this faction are certainly its unusual play style and the fact that you are often going to be able to surprise your opponents with the moves that you can do because of the special mechanics in your strategy sheet or in your character traits. Another strength is going to be your versatility, how you're going to just spread this underground network across the whole map pretty easily as the game progresses and be able to fight on such a variety of fronts that most of your opponents will not be able to do. And lastly, I would just emphasize the power of being able to sort of puppeteer the other factions through that trial of combat mechanic. You have so many ways to affect the conditioned states of characters, that injury, capture, death, and really cause harm to the other factions. You also have so many tricks at your disposal to mitigate harm to yourself when it comes to those elements. And don't forget the power of being able to choose events. This will completely make or break challenge phase for you. When it comes to weaknesses for the Brotherhood without banners, the big glaring weakness is your tiny roster. It means that the characters, units that you bring to each battle are going to be more predictable for your opponents to try and counter than their own larger rosters. It also means you're probably going to have to rely more on neutral characters, especially NCUs, and you're playing a faction that does not have a lot of access to coin, so you're going to have to do a lot of wheeling and dealing with the other players to mitigate that. Another weakness would be that geographically, you're probably not going to have much of a center of power. I mean, maybe the Riverlands if you really manage to gather a lot of strength there, but most likely you're going to be very spread out over the map. And when individual factions start to perceive you as a threat and start attacking those developments after declaring a sack, You may find that it's hard to gather allies to help you defend your developments because these battles may be taking place in remote areas that are hard for your allies to reach, and you may have trouble convincing them to put in the sacrifice to help you defend that. And then lastly, I would just point out that as Brotherhood, obviously you can ignore the normal location restrictions, but you still have to declare your path each time that you move. This means that the Brotherhood, more than anyone else, is going to have these commander movements during challenge phase that traverse huge areas of the map, making you extremely vulnerable to intercept challenges, probably more than any other faction. So make sure that you're calculating, looking ahead, judging the risk of that, paying off or making deals with anyone who could potentially intercept you, and try to avoid those risks unless you're confident that you can beat those factions on the battlefield. The Brotherhood without banners is such a unique and fun faction to play, and whether you take the approach of Lady Stoneheart with a brutal vengeance and aggressively bring that unrelenting justice to your foes in Westeros, or you take on the noble principles of Beric Dondarrion, valiantly standing up for the small folk of Westeros despite having to sacrifice your life over and over and over again for that very cause. Either way, I look forward to hearing your stories, and I hope that you enjoy bringing the King's Justice to Westeros in the Milestone Campaign League.